My name is Amber Lunas, and I'm going to teach you how to make a newspaper.
My name is Amber Lunas, and I'm going to teach you how to make a newspaper.
The first thing you do is get layout pages.
One of the first things you're going to do is get pages for laying out.
This is a mini model of what the paper will actually look like.
This is a smaller version of what the paper is actually going to look like when it's done.
First, you figure out how much advertising space will be going into the paper for that issue.
First, you figure out how much space you're going to need for the advertising in that paper.
Each staff writer goes around to local businesses and asks if they would like to advertise and figures out how much space they want advertised in the paper.
Staff writers are going to find different companies that would like to put their advertisements in the paper, and then they figure out how much space they need on the newspaper in order to
this space is
take up their advertisement.
and saved for each advertiser.
And once the space is drawn up for the advertiser, they know how much space they'll need.
Once that is done, stories are assigned to each staff writer, and the editor draws out how big the stories will be onto the pages as they fit according to the advertising.
The editor assigns different stories to the writers, and they figure out how much space they'll need for the advertisements.
So pretty much everything is based around the advertising.
Now that they know how much space they have around the advertising, they know how much space they can use for their story. So everything's really centered around the advertising.
Then the spaces for the photographs are made, and these spaces are then, the sizes are told to the photographers, who will then make a photo to fit the space.
Photographers are told what size they have in order to go out and take pictures to fill the space for the newspaper.
Once all the stories have been assigned and the pages have been drawn out, the writers go to work and research their topics.
Once all the spaces are put together and people know how much space they have in order to fit their picture or their advertisement and their story, the writers can go out, find their story, and then put it together in the newspaper.
A rough copy to the editor, who then reads it over and edits and makes any changes that they see fit or sees if there's any inaccuracies in the story.
Once the writers finish with the story, they give a rough copy to the editor. The editor then goes through the story, figures out if there's anything wrong with it, and then goes ahead and fixes it before going into the actual newspaper.
Once that is done, the writer writes it up on the computer and puts it into a program called PageMaker to be printed out to eventually be pasted onto the newspaper.
A program called PageMaker is used by the writers after the editor has finished editing their story, and they collaborate all their writings together to be put into the newspaper.
Once the story is actually in the paper, the editor will go in and design the story in the computer to fit the space that is allotted.
Once the story is actually put together in the newspaper, the editor then goes back and makes sure everything fits right.
Once that is done, the pages are printed up and they're pasted onto a large sheet of paper that's the actual size of the newspaper.
Once all that's done, the pages are printed out and put onto an actual piece of paper that's the exact same size as the newspaper.
The spaces are left for the photos, which will be added later.
There's some room left for photos, which those will be added at the end.
Once photographers take their photos, they bring them to the editor, and the editor cuts them and pastes them on the page.
The editor cuts and puts the photos onto the actual size of the newspaper from the photographers once they have them.
Then they take tape called line tape, which is a little black line, and it outlines each photo so that it'll make the picture look more spaced out and separate from the story when it's actually printed.
Line tape is used to make the pictures pop so that they stand out from the newspaper.
After that is done, captions are written for underneath the pictures, and those are pasted onto the pages as well.
Captions are put onto the paper underneath the pictures after the photos have been selected and set in their place.
Then finally, the advertisers send in their ads, which are then also to be pasted onto each page.
Finally, the advertisers' advertisements are put onto the pages in the specific spots that they had.
After that is done, these rough pages are sent to the printer to be printed in mass publication to be distributed to the school or to the city or wherever the newspaper is intended for.
So now that we have all these pieces put together on these sheets that are the same size as the newspaper, we're going to make copies of them and send them out to the distributors.
And that's how you make a newspaper.
That's how you make a newspaper.